Donnybrook is made possible by the members of the 9 Network.
Hey, thanks for joining us for this edition of Donnybrook, the second for this year, and the first now that we're known as 9 PBS. Come on, everybody, show your new apparel. You know, we were known as the 9 Network of Public Media. Now you can just know us as 9 PBS, embracing that great brand that is public broadcasting. And how many years now in St. Louis? 70? Wow. So before the program is over, we're going to talk to Jason Hall, who's the CEO of Greater St. Louis, Inc. We're going to talk about his plans to improve the area. But first, let's meet those who are on the panel, starting with the news director for the Big 550 KTRS and the co-host of Jennifer and Wendy in the morning. She's Wendy Wiese, along with Mr. Bill McClellan from the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, Ray Hartmann from 550 KTRS, along with the St. Louis American and rawstory.com. And we finally muzzled them. Thank goodness for that mask from 9 PBS. And everybody knows and loves Mr. Alvin Reid from the St. Louis American, 590 AM, just 4 megahertz or so down from Ray there on the AM dial, and also at 97.1 FM News Talk. Okay, why don't we start this program with you, Bill McClellan, because since we spoke last week, a number of corporations decided to suspend donations to Josh Hawley in particular, and to Democrats and Republicans in general, as it turns out. So, because they don't like what's going on in Washington, D.C., Ameren, Edward Jones, Hallmark Corporation in Kansas City, Commerce Bank Shares, Ryan Cave Law Firm in St. Louis, Walmart, General Motors, MasterCard, Citigroup, AT&T, and then individuals like Sam Fox and David Humphreys have said they're no longer contributing to candidates. Is this temporary, or will this be long-lasting, Bill?
Oh, temporary, 100%, I'm sure of that. You know, I mean, maybe for certain politicians, it'll be long-term. Like, they might be angry at Hawley and not give him money, but they want their voices heard. And the way you do that in American politics is you give money to people and parties and all of these people who right now are withholding their financial donations. As soon as they want something, which will be pretty soon, they will be knocking on the door and an envelope in their hand. Just temporary.
I think it is not temporary for Josh Hawley and Ted Cruz and the people who are the Mo Brooks, those people who are the ringleaders of this. I agree with Bill. I mean, they're not going to abandon the Republican Party long time. But for Josh Hawley, in Missouri politics, to lose the trifecta in 1 week of Sam Fox, David Humphreys, and the Hall family in Kansas City, which I cannot say enough how big a deal that is for a Republican, that is a bad week. And I don't think there's anything temporary about Josh Hawley, Chris. I think Josh Hawley is probably on pins and needles because
I'm not arguing that it's
if anything goes wrong, he's not going to be.
I'm just saying. I thought the question was broader than that.
No, it was, but I'm just saying.
I
think about Hawley, it's permanent, really. I think Hawley's in trouble personally.
I think what is so fascinating, if you go back to the beginning of the political careers of Josh Hawley and Eric Greitens, Josh Hawley was considered to be the less flammable. He was the more middle of the road, and the lesser of two young firebrand upstarts, and that's why this is just fraught with irony. And I do think that these corporations, when you look at 5 Americans who are no longer here because of what transpired on January 6th, I think their stockholders, that kind of thing is taken very seriously. So I don't think it's going to be short-lived. Like Bill said, it's certainly not permanent, but it's not going to be an overnight cure.
Well, overnight is a short time, and 4 years is a long time. And my guess is Josh Hawley will find his way back into the finances of some of these companies that have dropped him for now. Now, maybe he not turns over a new leaf, but just acts differently. I don't know, but I'm a doubter. I'm a doubter that this has any long-term impact. I am. Now, I think what happened in the Capitol a week ago and all that will, okay? But the fact that when it comes time to, do I want even somebody maybe even worse than Josh Hawley to be elected to that office on the Republican side, or God forbid, a Democrat, I think that money comes trickling back.
See, I know it could be wishful thinking, but I think Josh Hawley, particularly because of that picture, the picture with the fist, he's going to be in the history books. That's going to be an iconic figure, a picture. And we're not talking about local now. I mean, this national.
Right.
He is the face of that riot in a lot of ways because of that photograph. And I don't think, as I say, I think he'll get kicked out of the Senate if anything else happens next week.
Ray, you've been in journalism
and
and you've seen photos for years and years. Of all the political photos, that is possibly the most benign because he's just raising his hand, and he's not. So you don't see any of the Trump protesters along with him.
I agree with it, but I cannot tell you how many times it's
Charlie. One of the most iconic photos ever is John Carlos, Tommy Smith, Mexico City, 1968.
But they were clearly on that Olympic podium. That was iconic. I agree.
What I'm saying
he
is
was raising his fist, Charlie.
Yeah, I know. But
it was
our location, he could have been anywhere. Okay, maybe it's a silly argument.
Charlie,
I don't think it's going to resonate. But I think he's in trouble. I agree with you there. I just don't think it's that photo that's going to do him in.
I'm telling you that.
Let me ask, Ray, you may be right. You've been in print media for years, so you know these things. But what about Cori Bush? I thought she was too inflammatory at this time when in her debut speech on the floor of the House, she called the president, and I'm not defending the president in any single way, but she called him the white supremacist in chief. Don't you think it's time to tone down the rhetoric?
I get used to Cori Bush. She says what she thinks. She's bringing amazing vigor and passion to her job. She wants to speak for St. Louis. It's a really interesting contrast to Ann Wagner, who literally, figuratively hid under her desk again at the impeachment hearings, where she wasn't willing even to speak out, even though she's got some seniority there now, and obviously wasn't going to be one of the 10 Republicans with the profile and courage on Donald Trump, even though, and the interesting thing about Ann Wagner, just not to change the subject too much, is that she put out a press release in which she made the case for why you'd vote against Donald Trump and criticize him, but didn't have the guts to do it. It's a really interesting contrast because I know a lot of people are going to be offended by Cori Bush, but I'm glad that she's honest.
Charlie, I'm not a big fan of Ann Wagner. I wrote a column about her this past Sunday. I'm critical of Ann Wagner, but to say nothing is sometimes better than to say something. And I think that Cori Bush, when Ray says that, we got used to her, she speaks with passion, you could say that about Josh Hawley. And I'm sure 87 million people do. I don't think Cori Bush is doing us any favors when she speaks inflammatory language. I think when you're a freshman representative, it would be nice to just kind of hold your fire a little bit and stop with the name calling.
Well, I will say this. She touched a button that was me. This thing went awry nationally, in my eyes, and whatnot, at Charlottesville. That, wait a minute, there is a link between these supremacists and all that, and Donald Trump didn't put it down. So this statement by her is one that I'm walking the fence on. I hear you. I've said in past weeks on the show that, hey, do it right. Let's do it right. I will say this, though. It's the same thing that I worry about. This was close. That was close, but I'll give her the benefit of the doubt. But don't be the benefit of the doubt, Congressman. Be the one who acts wisely. And I'm not criticizing her, but I'm just saying that, right now, match dynamite, match gasoline, they're close. So just let's not.
With the law enforcement presence and the National Guard descending on D.C. and obviously the chatter about Inauguration Day, whether it's in each state capital or in our nation's capital, this is not the time. And Charlie said, she needs to watch the rhetoric. I think that goes for everybody on all sides of this.
Right.
I agree with
Everybody.
I think she's got, to me, I thought she was not on the other side of the line when she said defund the military. I thought that was a bad statement that she shouldn't have made. In this particular case, I think she's substantively right. So I'm fine with it.
Yeah,
and I understand.
And just real quick, Ann Wagner was hiding and all this was going on, and everybody can do as much bravado as they want to. I still defer to, she's a woman, okay? And there's men there and everything, but I will never, look, whatever Ann Wagner does, I know that she went through something I have never been through in my life, okay? And I cannot be critical of her for the actions, in that, because she was there. And so basically what I'm saying is, I don't mean to be mean, but anyway, I'll never say she hid under her desk or anything like that.
Because I didn't mean that as an
there are these conversations about whether these lawmakers have faced physical threats.
Well, and that's the one.
You don't think that's a possibility?
Oh, absolutely.
Some of the Republicans are concerned about that. I agree.
Right.
Right.
I will say you're the only person I know who wants to hear more from our representatives in Washington, D.C. If I don't hear another soundbite for the rest of my life, I'll be fine. Alvin, Reid, I want to ask you about the St. Louis County Council, which is in, I don't know, they're putting the in disarray.
Mm-hmm.
What happened, just a little primer for our viewers who may not be following this that carefully because it's a little deep in the weeds, but there was a charter change in 2020 that basically said that when the county council convenes for the first meeting of 2021, it elects a new chair. So they elected Lisa Clancy, but they did so with the lame duck representative, Rochelle Walton Gray, right? And the woman who beat her at the polls, Shalonda Webb, didn't join the county council till the second meeting. So Shalonda Webb did not have a chance to vote on the leadership for this year. I've never seen such a brazen power grab. I blame Lisa Clancy for this. Who do you think is responsible for this?
Well, and this goes back. This individual one, it's on Lisa Clancy, and so are a lot of other things. But I go back, and I respect and appreciate the former chief of police, Tim Fitch. I said he was going to run for county executive. I was wrong. He ran for, county council, so I was kind of right. And I really like him. But I think back when just over the last 5 months, he's kind of been like a loggerhead, and he's kind of been like a Mitch McConnell of the county council. And I think he had the presence and the wherewithal that we could have avoided all this. So I kind of blame him first. I absolutely do.
What about Beth Orwick's culpability here? I thought Lisa Clancy said that according to all of the stories that we read, it was Lisa Clancy with Beth Orwick's blessing. So if she's dispensing legal advice, what is Lisa Clancy to do?
Let's move on with our next topic. Wendy Wiese, Wiley Price, who's a member of the state legislature, represents St. Louis in the House, has been censured by his colleagues after one of his associates says he claimed in a personal conversation with her that he had sexual relations with an intern. The intern is not discussing it and hasn't said that that is the fact, but there was a special panel that looked into this in December, and in an 8-page report concluded that although Representative Price claimed not to have had any contact or phone numbers with the intern, in fact, he did have her phone number, had made phone calls, including one that lasted 42 minutes. With that evidence, his colleagues decided to censure him, although some people thought he should have been expelled. What's your opinion on this?
Well, if this had been a situation where you have a predatory legislator who has cornered an intern and compromised everything, I think that's one thing. The fact that the very next day after this happened, he told his aide about what had transpired. The fact that, according to that committee that you spoke about, they were equal in equal number. Democrats and Republicans thought that censure was fine over expulsion. The fact that both the intern and Wiley Price initiated the phone calls after the incident, and one of those phone calls lasted 46 minutes. And he said, I panicked, I lied, I'm embarrassed to have put us in this position. The censure is going to cost him $22,500 for the investigation that has occurred. I say censure is fine. He obviously is not going to be on any committees. That's part of the censure, and he won't be allowed to have an intern. So I think a censure is fine in this case.
You know, I'll go along with that. The only argument I'd make with you, Wendy, is when you say not predatory. I mean, when you're the legislator and she's the intern, I mean, that's an unequal relationship. That's like saying Monica Lewinsky was of age. Well, she was, but Bill Clinton was the president. And I know Wiley Price's junior dad, and I like him. And I'm sorry to see all this happen, but you know, let's not minimize it. Is all I'm saying.
And I don't mean to minimize it. What I'm talking about is the length of the conversations between the two of them suggests that I don't know the age of the intern. Does anybody on the panel know the age of the intern? I have not heard or read it anywhere. You're right, Bill. In terms of the power structure involved, you're absolutely right. I'm just saying it doesn't seem to be.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I think the punishment fits the crime. I mean, basically what Wendy's saying. I know what I just do. I don't think there's any need to. This is, you know, to me, expulsion has to be reserved for something pretty over the top, and I don't think this kind of offense, and all politicians lie when they're pinned down on issues of sex. I just don't think that that's cause for expulsion. I think financial crimes in the legislature, I think those kinds of things, maybe, but not something like this. But at the same time, he is punished. I think he deserves to be. I mean, there's no question.
The internship is supposed to be a learning experience. They're for college students. It's not for romping with lawmakers. And I agree that, well, I would say, I don't know if the evidence is there without the cooperation of the intern, but we don't know if there's any pressure on her to be silent, because the aide to Representative Price did indicate that she was threatened when she mentioned that she was going to go public with this. So maybe it's just one of those cases like many of these where we never will have all the answers, but we do know that there are rules in the House now. After John Deal was in trouble for this,
that's what I was going to.
You can't have relationships with your interns.
That's what I was going to say. And if you put yourself in that situation, then you have to live with whatever the judgment is of, be it your peers from St. Louis or the entire legislative body.
Hey, Bill McClellan, I want to ask you, because you're a native of Illinois, the land of Lincoln. Mike Madigan, who had been the House Speaker since 1983. I'm laughing. It's almost incredible that anyone could hold a position like that for so long. But he really wielded a lot of influence. He's a very powerful person. Some people thought one of the most powerful lawmakers in America, even though he didn't have federal office. But I think that under his tenure, Illinois has gone from a state that had some of the highest ratings by Moody's and S&P to one of the lowest. And in the last 10 years, 250,000 people have moved out, 80,000 in the last 12 months. The state's a financial basket case. And I think it's a lot of his doing, because he just spent too much money. And so I don't know if the state can come back. What's your take on this?
Well, he was a dictator. I mean, it's kind of like Mike Madigan, meet Lisa Clancy. I think that Lisa probably looks up to Mike Madigan. But no, I don't blame Mike Madigan for all the problems of the state. And people moving out of Illinois, I think, has more to do with the weather than Mike Madigan. The state has a huge pension problem, but as Mr. Reid has often said, they're trying to gain money. And I turn the floor over to Mr. Reid.
Absolutely. Now, shortly here, we'll get the bottom line on the recreational and medicinal marijuana. And it's going to be like 3 times what they expected and going to go up. Gambling's about to take over too. You got one thing that makes all the difference, and I don't care what people downstate say about it. You've got Chicago, Illinois, okay? Illinois is fine. And if you wanted to talk about a state that's in trouble, it's ours. Okay. So I'm not going to, I can't look and say any state is more financially, morally, whatever, more bankrupt than Missouri is right now. So I'm good with Illinois.
I don't know about that, Alvin.
But now wait, real quick, Madigan needs to go nationally. Democrats, look around. The winds are changing. Get younger, get smarter, get less dictatorial. So yeah, goodbye, Mike Madigan. Your day's over.
I agree with Alvin, except I would take exception to the comment about Lisa Clancy, who I'm not on her side on some issues, but that's a little much. But I do think that Alvin's right, that it's long overdue. And he's also right. Before you start talking about trash in Illinois, let's talk about the services that Illinois residents get versus what they get in Missouri.
I thought he was just suspending his campaign for
That's
House
right.
Speaker.
It's possible
but they're going to vote him out.
I think they should.
And they very well. But if anybody has 9 lives, it's Michael Madigan. And
they've got a new person already.
Yeah.
And Wendy, the list of favors owed to him and that he owes people will probably take 2 weeks to filter out, so it'll be a little bit, but he's gone.
Well, I disagree. I don't think Missouri is losing the population that Illinois is. I'm not sure.
We don't have it.
We don't have a population.
As a percentage, they're not either as a percentage, and nor are they in the financial trouble that Illinois is. When you have $135 billion pension liability because you couldn't say no to any of the public unions.
If Illinois tried to host
policemen and teachers, Charlie.
Yeah.
I mean that's where this is. So you say public unions, you're trying
and I'm talking corrections officers and everybody else who works for the state, and they provided this campaign war chest for the House Speaker through all those years, for 40 years, Bill.
If Illinois tried to get an NFL team in Springfield, Illinois, they would have a better chance than St. Louis getting another one. Okay? Look at it. The world looks at Illinois and Chicago as a place they want to be. That is not true for Missouri. So
I don't think so, Alvin.
Okay.
Chicago's losing population.
No, come on now. All right.
Well, let me ask.
They're losing population in Trump Tower.
Okay. Ray, I'm going to move to you. This is an unusual story, but it's got a couple of angles. Number one, there was a dispatcher for St. Louis County Police, and he used the N-word. He actually used more than the N-word. And he has been suspended, at least temporarily. Turns out that he is the brother-in-law of the chief of police, Mary Barton, right? So that's one angle. Now, the next angle is that the police lieutenant who's in charge of diversity and inclusion, Keith Wildhaber, spoke out about it. And he basically said that St. Louis County Police have to get a grip on their systemic racism and do something about this. And then he allegedly was chastised by the Human Resources Office of the county, saying that he should not speak out, even though there are other police like Lieutenant Troy Doyle who speak out all the time on Twitter and, in fact, commented on this very case, and he wasn't apparently chastised. So I guess a county, like any organization, can tell its employees that they have to be careful about speaking to the public. I don't know. What do you think about this? Who's on the right? Who's on the wrong?
The person who looks the best in this story is Keith Wildhaber. Good for him. He was opposed by a lot of people of color when they made him the diversity inclusion officer, and he said the right thing at the right time. And I have to tell you, Chief Mary Barton, if the St. Louis County Police Board is going to have to look at what they've got there, because I don't care that it's a brother-in-law. I mean, that's just bad luck. But the key elements here that involve the chief are she did not disclose, and I think Tony Messenger may have been the one pointing this out. She did not disclose that it was her brother-in-law until the press did, which is a big problem. And the second is, apparently, according to the one story I saw, she told Keith Wildhaber, whose job it is to talk to the public about stuff like this, to not talk to the public. And
Now, are you sure it's his job to talk to are you sure it's his job to talk to the public about this?
Yes, I mean, well, it should be. I mean, he's a diversity inclusion officer. If he can't talk, who can? Here's the deal. She's got to understand part of her job is communication, and I don't think she's up to it. That's all I can say.
I think she is from a different era. It is unfortunate that she said quite emphatically earlier, like right after she became chief, that there is no systemic racism in the St. Louis County Police Department. I think that Keith Wildhaber was addressing it as you would expect the diversity and inclusion officer to address it. If he's phoned by the media and if he believes that something should be addressed, I don't think that he should be penalized for that.
It's interesting because on July 31st, he gave an interview to Jenna Barnes of KSDK, and he said there was systemic racism, but it was against gay white males like himself. And that was at the time when on his Facebook post, he said because of ESOP, the Ethical Society of Police, he was going to quit. He wouldn't spend 3 more years with them, but then he came back in August. So
I'll tell you, if Wildhaber would have said, there's some problems, but Sam Page is doing a great job, he wouldn't have been called in on the carpet.
Good point.
I agree with Ray and Wendy. Wildhaber's job is partially to communicate with the public.
Yeah, go ahead, Ray.
No, I've been talking too much. I just want to say one thing. I happen to agree with Esau about the fact that a person of color should have been in that role. So to be clear, I do think, and I'm not into identity politics like a lot of people on the left. I will say in that particular role, given the problem with systemic racism in the police department, the diversity inclusion officer should be a person of color.
You know what? And when I recall when they made that statement, it wasn't that a person of color should be there, but someone who had professional experience in inclusion.
I'm saying this should be a person of color.
Well, we're out of time. You'll miss my great thought there. You can thank the clock for that. In a moment, we're going to check in with Jason Hall of Greater St. Louis, Inc. He wants to improve the region by, among other things, increasing the number of jobs in the city of St. Louis. That's just around the corner on Next Up.
Donnybrook is made possible by the members of 9 PBS.
Hey, thanks for joining us for Next Up. We are so pleased to welcome Jason Hall, the CEO of Greater St. Louis, Inc., to the firing line, as it were. Good evening, Jason. How are you doing?
I'm great. Good evening, and it's a privilege to be here with the team.
Well, if you could, please just tell us a little something about Greater St. Louis, Inc., and maybe your mission, the big picture, what you intend to do.
Yeah, we're going to get up every day working to get this metropolitan region growing again and creating more jobs, and doing so with intention to be inclusive. We cannot leave anybody behind as we start to grow this economy, but we have got to commit to being a growth region. We've been stagnating, and if we want to have a future, we've got to grow.
Alvin?
Jason, so much is made of the young people and the flight of young people. I contend that many of them do move back, to begin their lives and their families. But what are you addressing specifically, or are you even addressing at this stage, how to keep young people in the city of St. Louis and in the surrounding area?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's critical because for communities that grow, you got to keep bringing young people into it. It's got to be a community of choice. I think it starts one. This is a great place. We have tremendous assets here. It's a tremendous place to live and a high quality of life. You got to get that narrative out. And one of the projects and initiatives we've been working on is to do a better job of telling that St. Louis story so that people can choose you. They know what you stand for, what it's like to live here. And we're doing that through the lives of real St. Louisans. You can go to the STL.com as part of the STL Made initiative, which I know was talked about on this show. I watched that when we launched, to get that out so people can get a picture of what it's like to be here. We also, doing some things around, the bike ped infrastructure. People want to be in a place where they can be mobile on bikes and walk to places. And we're doing some critical work on that. Projects like the Brickline Greenway. People love this. Young people are attracted to it. And those are of the many things. Those are a few that I would highlight that we need to do to bring more young people here and have opportunities where they see they have a future, and being an inclusive place, because people want to be in a place that is diverse, globally connected. That's the kind of community people want to live in, and we've got to live those values.
Bill?
Hey, well, man,
Okay.
I'm one of those kids who left, went to college. I didn't come back till I was 35 years old. Okay. And when I came back, one of the strangest things ever, for a couple of years, I worked for RCGA. All right. And what you're saying right now, as enthusiastic as you are, we were saying it when I was there in 1995, and they were saying it in 2002, and they've been saying it. And it's the same players saying the same things that we have heard so many times before. I'm sorry. My daughter, one goes to school in Chicago. My youngest is going to University of Missouri. She's getting into engineering. Look, people want bike pass, and people want this, and people want that, but people don't want to be discriminated against. And people don't want to live in a place where their efforts are not appreciated for the color of their skin. And St. Louis has that problem. And before we, do the, that, how about we really get down to business on what is wrong with this region? And so far, what I've read, I'm not impressed that you all are ready to do that.
Well, I appreciate that. And it is a critical issue. The racial inequities that exist are unacceptable. And I think looking at the 2030 jobs plan, the draft that is out there, specifically calling out that systemic racism holds us back. It is costing us jobs. It is costing the economy. And on a personal level, it's unacceptable in this country, and it's unacceptable in this region. We identify some very specific strategies in that plan that have surfaced on how we start to close that through jobs. Not one group or one plan is the answer to all of the solutions that we face in systemic racism, justice reform, other critical areas that people are working on, education. But as it relates to jobs and opportunity, the plan goes to the heart of that. And again, there's no substitute for the hard work we've got to do and the change in behavior that we need to have in this region if we are going to change that. Because I agree. And I will tell you, when I came back to St. Louis, I grew up in Granite City, Illinois, one of the first in my family to go graduate from high school, the first to go to college. And I had a lot of opportunity in a lot of cities before me. I had just come out as a gay man and literally in St. Louis for a few months. And the first thing thrown in my face is a constitutional ban on my right to marry. And I was forced into that civil rights, and I was scared to death as the first openly gay lawyer at Brian Caven, St. Louis, big corporate law firm. And I remember what that was like. And I fought that fight, and I'm going to fight for every other kid that is being left behind. And again, specific race is a very specific issue, and I would focus specifically on Black St. Louisans that have faced the systemic racism for far too long. And again, the jobs community, the economic development community has a role to play. I have not seen anything this direct in the jobs community, the economic development community, to work to close those gaps as I've seen in this 2030 plan.
Jason, you're a powerful example of an openly gay man who succeeded in St. Louis. And I read that you came out in the Post-Dispatch and your mother called you at 6 a.m. to say she read it. And I want to commend your parents for getting the paper.
Yeah.
Things haven't really improved. I mean, just this past year, we had the Attorney General, Eric Schmidt, join with a lawsuit from another state after a federal judge said that gays and transgenders were protected from employment discrimination by the Civil Rights Act. And we felt the need, Mr. Schmidt did, to jump into the fray and disagree with that ruling. And, we've been talking earlier about Sam Page in the county council. His first diversity director was Hazel Irby, who had voted against giving gays and transgenders protection on the basis of sexual orientation. And I wonder, when you're trying to attract these 21st century businesses, and the area still seems to have a mid 20th century attitude, how do you do it? I mean, because companies, they want their employees to feel comfortable and welcomed. And how are you going to deal with that? I read your report, and you did deal with racial things, but I didn't see anything about that.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it's a reminder too. We have to work to shape the kind of community we want to live in. And I'll tell you, not only was facing the constitutional ban as soon as I got back to Missouri. When I came back from Governor Nixon's administration, and I, like Alvin, was at the RCGA, the chamber, for a couple of years, we were thrust into the fight over the bathroom bill with SJR 39. And, we organized the business community to speak on that issue. Rob Raig from MasterCard, you may recall, Hugh Grant from Monsanto at the time, taking firm positions. And we worked with our partners throughout the state to go down to that state capitol and lean in and speaking on this issue. And there were some critical votes, and we defeated it. Actually, at the time when North Carolina did not. They were the other state facing this at the time. But it took hard work. It took organizing the business community. It took speaking out. It took going down to the Capitol in late nights. We're going to have to do that kind of work to get the kind of community that we want. If we're going to, fight these pernicious mindsets that are holding us back. Because if we're not an inclusive and welcoming community, we're not going to attract the talent, people, the creators that we need. And I'd be the first to say that. But it is going to take a lot of work. There's no doubt about it. And I'll tell you, I do feel, as an example, I found success. I connected with people here. And I mean, who would have thought that at one point, I wouldn't have thought that an openly gay kid that grew up in Granite City, Illinois, would one day be trusted to steward a new civic organization like this. I would have thought that unthinkable. And my colleague and longtime friend, Val Patton, who, again, newly created position, the first chief diversity, equity, and inclusion officer ever on these organizations, one of the most respected civic leaders in this region. We're thinking differently. Different people are in the leadership roles, and we're going to have to keep working for that so that every child like us has that opportunity. But we're going to have to work for it. It is hard.
Jason, I got a question that's a lot more boring than the last two, which probably won't bother you. But I want to ask you about, you used the R word, region, as in regionalism.
Yeah.
I'm curious as to how the business community can bridge the divide between the city, county, not so much between the city and county, but between the city, county, and the surrounding counties. Steve Ellman, the St. Charles County executive, didn't give particular rave reviews to the plan you're talking about. What can you do? To bring, because it feels like there just, as I'm sure you know, there's more people living outside of the city and county combined than there are in the city and county combined in the metropolitan area, as defined by the Census Bureau. So what can you do to bring people together as a business community?
Well, I'll tell you, it starts with having open lines of communication. And I said, one of the things, here we are in week 2. And I said, I'm calling and I'm going to meet with all 15 of the principal county elected officials in the bi-state metro. And I will tell you, some of them said, never been contacted by the regional business community. and happy to be a part of it. We can't talk about regionalism in a silo. We actually have to reach out to the partners and the people that we need to work with. So I do think there's a powerful role in convening. And not one person that I've spoken to. In fact, I was over, had a great conversation with Chairman Kern this morning. I was over in Edwardsville this afternoon with Chairman Prinzler in my home county, in Madison County. And these are good people, practical leaders that care. And want to work at this. Nobody wakes up saying, I don't want this metro to succeed. And I think there's a recognition we're all in this together. And there are things we can do at the metro level that move the region forward. But it does start with dialogue, some ideas. And I'll tell you, County Executive Development I've known for a very long time. I respect him. And I thought the fact that he cared to write an 8-page constructive letter, and let's say that was constructive feedback. We said this is a draft. If we're going to be committed to community engaged dialogue and planning, it's going to be messy at times. It doesn't mean we all agree on every issue, but there's a constructive way to do that. And if we can't take that feedback, then I don't need to be in this chair. And I think we need to listen. I think the report that Bruce is working on will be better because of that feedback. And we will be a stronger region because we have the courage to have that dialogue. So I applaud the county executive for speaking up. It's because he cares. It's when people stop caring and apathy sets in that I'm really worried.
I think one of his concerns was your plan to create a lot of jobs in the urban core in the city. And he was, I'm paraphrasing here, saying, hey, what about St. Charles County? Well, talk about creating jobs in the urban core, and can the region rebound without a strong urban core, in your view?
No, there's no model for success without a strong core. The core is absolutely critical to metropolitan growth. We're all in that together. And I think there has been recognition. I think some of the specific language that the county executive development had was around an older draft of the report about locating all new jobs in the core versus a share of the new jobs that are created in the region. So I think language matters. And again, I'm glad he highlighted it because it's important to have that dialogue so we can figure how we work as a metro to strengthen the core. But I have heard, again, engaging with people throughout the region, most people understand it. Quite frankly, they're hearing it from their kids because their kids go to other cities because they're not seeing the vibrancy that they want. Or people say, I really like the cultural amenities that are in the core, the sports teams, those kinds of things. There is a connectedness, and I think people understand that. I think the report in the draft does need to do a better job of explaining how some of the other strategies, focusing on advanced production, focusing on geospatial, benefit all parts of the metro. And I think the language needs to improve around that. But I don't think there is a strong disagreement on the role of the core if we're going to be a growing metro going forward.
Okay, I kind of disagree with you on that. There is a problem. Look, Steve Alvin being who he is, I appreciate him too. We met him, we talked with him. That's St. Charles, but St. Charles has got their own thing. Franklin County, Jefferson County, they don't care. Okay, quite frankly, we have a governor that does not care about St. Louis. All right, I'm not talking about the region. I'm talking about that core right there. They don't care. I know we have at least one senator that certainly don't care. All right. Are you talking to them? And when you talk to them, is it, well, please, or is it, you've got to change, or we're serious this time? I mean, there's power and there's wealth behind your effort, but are you truthfully going to speak to these people and say, like, your attitude has to change, or St. Louis and Kansas City won't change, and as a result, the state is losing out?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. My words don't deviate depending on what room I'm in. We're setting some clear priorities here, going through a process for this region to engage around those ideas. Bruce Katz will ultimately issue a final report, and we're going to fight for those priorities. And Alvin as well, right? It can be tough in the political arena. I spent time in Jefferson City. We all have different styles, I think, about how we go about delivering that message. My style when I was in Jefferson City, as I say, I was trying to create, people told me it was going to be impossible to get a conservative legislature to go along with building the Missouri Technology Corporation and start getting the state to support the tech startup community because it was so city focused in Kansas City and St. Louis. People said it was impossible, but I found you go door to door, you meet with people, you talk about what you're working on, be honest with them, stand for something, and let it be authentic. That you can find common ground to move those ideas forward. And I'm going to have that message around inclusive growth, and we're going to have that message around the core and the other priorities in this report. And I'm not under any mistake. We will have to fight for those priorities at times. Might all be different styles that we use to try to win people over to understand the importance of it. But I'm not going to deviate from that.
Ray?
Oh, back to me, all right. I guess my question for you, and this is a little out of your, it's almost an unfair question, but I look at Michael Neidorff at Centene as sort of the prototypical example of the way things have been done, kind of like a little bit along the lines of Alvin's view of, what's going to change. Here's a guy, he's a old white guy, just like for a long time, it was all white guys that ran Civic Progress. And he's just recently trashed, and he's got a lot of respect as an amazing success story. He just trashed St. Louis on the national stage twice in the last year. And once over Charlotte, and then what was it recently again? I just wrote about it.
Jennings.
The police, Jennings,
and the police department.
Because nobody can walk down the street safely in Clayton, And it's like, I guess my question to you is, what do you see among your bosses, guys like Andy Taylor, who to his credit have been out there on this? What is it? Do you see some self-awareness among them that they need to have as peers? Some people of color, like in Atlanta, like in some other communities, where it's not just about mentoring, African Americans into business, but that they're actually at the table. Is there it's wonderful, by the way, that you're the face of this, but is there really any self-awareness that they've got to stop having this kind of white father knows best thing going on? Because I see that continuing. I'm sorry, but is there any?
Yeah, I think so. And I think we have to. I mean, we've got to create tables that reflect this community. And quite frankly, I'd go further, that share power in this community, that empower people in this community. I feel very strongly about that. And I'll say, don't just take my words for it, but look at the work, especially over the last few years when we said, we're going to come together as a community and we're going to be just like we did in biotech. We're going to leverage the NGA's $2 billion investment to be a global leader in geospatial. Look at the table and look at the people we brought together to shape that future from the community development sector. Harris Stowe, and they had a very, deeply personal conversation because the president at the time had actually started his first internship. He grew up in North City and had his first internship at the old DMA, which became the NGA, and said, do you know what it's like to be sitting at a table shoulder to shoulder with leaders now shaping this industry after what I went through, in the 1970s in St. Louis City. I mean, that work speaks for itself. We're imperfect because we're human, but we got to get better, and it starts with intention. And I will give you my word, I am committed to doing that everywhere that I can, and I will lead by example. Again, no one organization is going to solve all challenges, but we got to model the behavior that we want others to. I firmly believe that. And I look forward to a more beautiful St. Louis that values everyone and brings those voices and seats at the table. At the end of the day, it will be uncomfortable for some in the short run, but we will be a stronger community in the long run if we actually listen and share that power.
Bill?
All right, well, let's talk about immigration. I mean, most people who talk about growing an economy say that immigrants are so important. They're hardworking, they're entrepreneurial, and we seem to do everything we can to discourage immigrants. I mean, Missouri made English the official language of the state as if there was a danger. It was just sort of let people know. and the West County Republicans in 2019 for their Lincoln Day invited Sheriff Joe, the disgraced sheriff of Maricopa County, who may be the most overt anti-Latino in the country, as their speaker. I mean, how can these are the immigrants that we should want? Like, would you go like talk to the West County Republicans and say you can't bring Sheriff Arpaio here? I mean, how do you deal with stuff like that?
Well, right, and we know there's going to be those kind of responses at times. But when I wake up, I think of the pioneering work that's brought immigrants to this community. Anna Crosland, we're losing her to retirement, but what a pillar of this community. What Betsy Cohen did for the Mosaic Project, we're leading positively, saying we are going to welcome immigrants to this community. I think being smashingly successful with those kind of initiatives is the best response to hate. And I think we lead with a voice. You are welcome here. We value here. Critical. We know. I mean, St. Louis University did the research. Immigrants multiple times more likely than native-born Americans to create a business. They're entrepreneurial. This is a city and a metro whose resurgence is coming from that entrepreneurial community. We need to welcome with open arms the foreign-born population, and we will use this bully pulpit to do that.
Wendy?
That's
St. Louis without the foreign-born population. I think we're all evidence of that. Jason, in terms of the puzzle, one huge piece of the puzzle is transportation and mass transit. Metrolink, where is Metrolink on the wish list of the organization?
Yeah, well, it's critical, obviously, to have strong transit. It's critical for people to access jobs. It's part of being inclusive. And it's another reason why having accessible jobs in the core along public transit are critical. The report itself, the jobs plan, does not go deep into specifics around Metrolink, but it is critical. In week 2, I look forward to working with those responsible for managing it, because it is a critical link for people to be able to access jobs, and it needs to be safe, reliable, and my family, my partner uses Metro to get to work. When we lived downtown, it was right. It works at Washington University Medical Center. Was able to take the Metro Link. My family's used it, so I get it. It is important, and we need to keep investing in it to be a world-class competitive city.
Jason, doesn't Michael Neidorf have a point that crime is hindering our growth?
I think we need to live in a safe and equitable community, and I hear, and I'll be very candid. I've heard a lot about crime and public safety as I'm engaging with others throughout the region. I'm not going to sweep that under the rug. I think there's also been, and I think Ray has written about this, when you compare the Metro statistics for Charlotte to St. Louis around crime, I see a lot of difference there. But I still think when we saw the numbers that we saw in the city of St. Louis, those are lives lost. Those are families impacted. And that is just unacceptable. So we need to live in safe and equitable communities. Having jobs, creating jobs, and connecting people to jobs that have been left out of the economy or left behind is one of the answers. It's not the only answer. I mean, let's be real. Public safety has got a lot of facets to it. But getting people jobs and access to those jobs, the earlier we can do that, is one of the best crime prevention tools we have in this city and metro.
We really have just about 30 seconds to go.
Yeah.
Is there a way that people can be of assistance or participate, get involved?
Yeah, I would say right now is we're engaging the public with ideas around this 2030 jobs plan. We're all in this boat together. I encourage folks to read it and give honest feedback. It is okay to be constructive. It's okay that we don't disagree right now. That's how we get better. And so right now, I think one of the best things we can do is provide that feedback so that we've got the benefit of that. as we start to move forward in the decade. GreaterSTLinc.com.
Thank you. Thank you, Jason Hall from Greater St. Louis Inc. and GreaterStLouisInc.com. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity.
Donnybrook is made possible by the members of 9PBS.